breath.
Greetings. Good day to all of you from all over the world. What a wonderful time again to have our series of webinars. As we always say, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you as we are having a virtual platform. Today, our scientific organization, ICOH-MINOSH, is having the fourth of its webinar series entitled The Promise and Potential Consequences of Screening Tests for Early Detection of Silicosis and silico-tuberculosis. Our webinar series is free and open to all. Today, we are joined in this webinar by 248 registrants coming from 28 countries, 10 African, 6 each from Asia and Europe, 3 from South America, 2 from North America, and Australia. MINOSH stands for Mining Occupational Safety and Health. It is a scientific committee of the International Commission on Occupational Health, or ICOH in short. We have had a series of webinars since 2021 during the pandemic, and this is the fourth in our series, as I said. Today, September 28, is another yet exciting and relevant webinar to promote occupational safety and health in mining and related sectors in society. As the chair of MINOSH, I am pleased to give the opening remarks. I am Jinky Leilani Lu from the National Institutes of Health, University of the Philippines, Manila. First, allow me to introduce to you our organization that is hosting this event. Our mother organization, the International Commission on Occupational Health, or ICOH, is the oldest scientific association in the field, founded in 1906. It has around 2,000 members from more than 100 countries worldwide. ICOH is an NGO recognized by the United Nations and has a close working relationship with the International Labor Organization and the World Health Organization. ICOH has been at the forefront in advocating statements and policies on protecting the occupational safety and health for all types of workers. Recently, the ICOH board approved an ICOH statement on protecting occupational safety and health of migrant workers. In fact, the ICOH past president also presented an ICOH statement at the opening discussion of the 110th session of the International Labor Conference General Affairs Committee in May 2022, declaring that safety and health is a fundamental right at work. MINOSH, hosting this webinar, is one of the scientific committees of ICOH that was founded in 2015. In MINOSH, we recognize the strategic need for both scientific efforts and advocacies on the ground, praxis of a sort, where field and laboratory works should be informed by evidence and data. At the same time, policies and programs should be sensitive to the realities of humanity and experience of people within the overarching value of justice, equity, and collegiality. In MINOSH, we pursue a plurality of good ideas and access a multitude of avenues for our OSH agenda to be heard worldwide. This is why we are having this series of webinars. Silicosis, the disease topic for today, is one of the dreadful occupational diseases among miners and workers in high-risk industries globally. According to the ILO, silicosis is a serious lung disease known to potentially cause progressive and permanent physical disability and afflicts millions and kills thousands of workers globally each year. Hence, there is a clamor for the prevention of this disease and its control within the occupational safety and health framework. Part of this is putting up surveillance on monitoring systems for silico and silico-tuberculosis. Why also include silico-tuberculosis? According to the American Lung Association 2022, testing for tuberculosis is important because the disease tends to be more severe in persons with silicosis. COVID-19 was a curse at one junction in our recent history and even in our present milieu. However, the COVID-19 experience has also rallied discoveries and inventions on portable, inexpensive, and rapid testing kits in conjunction with the laboratory-based diagnostic tests that usually take longer to produce test results. Today, we will focus instead on screening tests for one of the oldest occupational diseases in history, which is silicosis and silico-tuberculosis. Just like other diseases, there is a clamor for a rapid screening and detection test, especially in resource-scarce settings. Why the need for a rapid screening and detection test? In a study in the Journal of Respiratory Diseases in 2022, quote, "The etiology of silicosis is clear, preventable, and controllable, but the onset is hidden and the duration is long. Hence, it is clear that the slow progression of the disease and it being undetected could lead to advanced stages of silicosis and deterioration of patients. We hope that a rapid, reliable, accessible local screening test for silicosis and silico-tuberculosis will come into fruition, but of course, within the rubric of the ethics of clinical trials, good epidemiologic data, and promises of universal health care. Lastly, I would like to declare that MINOSH is conducting this webinar panel discussion not to promote anyone's self-interested agenda, but to have an open discourse as a community of stakeholders in attempt to promote health for all and to do no harm to nobody. Thank you. Now, we proceed to the most awaited part, the webinar panel discussion. The technical coordinators of this webinar is the MINOSH Subcommittee on Silica Exposure and Tuberculosis, co-chaired by Marilyn Fingerhut and Perry Gottesfeld. Marilyn Fingerhut is retired, but is still consulting for the United States National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, or NIOS. She is also the former Vice President of ICOH. Perry Gottesfeld is Executive Director of Occupational Knowledge International, or OK International in short, a non-governmental organization which was founded in 1999 to address inequities in environmental and occupational standards between developed and developing countries. OK International has implemented safer mining projects to reduce silica dust exposures in small-scale and artisanal mining communities in Asia and Africa. Gottesfeld obtained his Master's of Public Health in Biomedical and Environmental Health Sciences from the University of California, Berkeley. Perry will now give us a brief overview of the Silica TB Committee, the mechanics of the webinar, and will introduce our main discussant and the three panelists.
Thank you, Jane. And thank you for that excellent introduction and for your leadership in MINOSH. As you heard, today's webinar is being sponsored by our subcommittee on silica exposure and TB. This subcommittee was established about 5 years ago in anticipation of the first ever UN General Assembly meeting on tuberculosis that was held in 2018. At that time, a few of us in MINOSH initiated an effort to bring an occupational health perspective to the UN process. Up until that time, there's been little interaction between the global TB community and those working on occupational health and occupational medicine. In coordination with the ICOH Scientific Committee on Occupational Health for Health Workers, we introduced language to recognize opportunities to prevent TB and not just diagnose and treat the disease. In the end, we were successful in getting our language into the final UN declaration adopted by the General Assembly, which sets the agenda for eliminating TB by 2030, in line with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Silicosis and silico-tuberculosis are of growing concern in occupational medicine. At the same time, there is growing awareness that silica dust exposures in the workplace are a significant contributor to the spread of TB in dozens of countries around the world. The threat from uncontrolled silica dust exposures is only expected to get worse, with the growing demand for metal mining, artificial stone countertops, and from the production of sand, gravel, and cement needed for expanded urbanization. In recent years, we have found that informal sector miners that make up about 90% of all miners are experiencing much higher rates of silica, are experiencing much higher silica exposures and much higher rates of silicosis, silico-tuberculosis, and TB than we have seen in similar populations in industrial mining. With this growing disease burden, there's been a push to improve screening and diagnostic tests to help detect disease even where treatments are limited. Today, we will explore the opportunity and potential consequences of early detection screening tests for silicosis. A recent review article published last year by Austin et al. Identified at least 7 studies of various biomarkers that have been investigated for this purpose. More recently, an article was published this year in Nature on inflammatory indices for silicosis and progressive massive fibrosis among engineered stone workers. So there's certainly lots of interest in this area. For today's webinar, we will first hear from Dr. Panelist Sarkar, who will discuss his research on a particular biomarker. Following his talk, we have invited 3 discussants to provide feedback and their perspectives on the promise and pitfalls of silicosis screening. I will introduce them following Dr. Sarkar's presentation, but we're pleased to have a panel of experts from India, Indonesia, and South Africa to provide a global perspective to this issue. Again, we're taking questions via the chat box, and when you enter your questions in the chat, could you please put your name and home country? This will help us identify questions from other extraneous items in the chat, and we'll identify who to attribute the questions to. So to begin, Dr. Panelist Sarkar is a public health physician and the director of the National Institute of Occupational Health under the Indian the Indian Council of Medical Research, ICMR. Presently, he is associated with ICMR's Calcutta office, and academically, Dr. Sarkar did his MBBS from Calcutta Medical College and his MD in public health from All India Institute of Medical Sciences in New Delhi. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Sarkar to kick off the presentation. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Perry, for your kind introduction. And at the outset, I must thank the organizers for giving me opportunity for presenting this. Really, I am excited to share our experiences with so many learned audience and experts. So let us start. So I think, is it audible to everyone? Is it visible to everyone? Hello?
Not yet.
Okay. The title of my presentation is, as already it is announced, the promise and potential consequences of screening tests for early detection of silicosis and silico-tuberculosis. So these are very common scenarios, just like dry dealing, manual cutting of sandstones. As long as these kind of operations will continue, silicosis will continue to exist. Industrial hygiene plays a big role in dust control, and unless dusts are controlled, controlling silicosis is very difficult. As all of you know,
Dr.
silicosis
Sarkar.
is yes.
Dr. Sarkar, your voice is audible, but the presentation is not visible yet. You need to share the screen. Thank you.
You need to share his presentation.
Is it okay now? Is it okay?
Not
Is
yet.
it visible now?
We cannot see.
You can proceed.
Yeah,
Can you see now?
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Silicosis is a debilitating, as all of you know, silicosis is a debilitating and progressive disease, often fatal at an advanced stage, but it is 100% preventable disease caused by an exposure to crystalline silica particles. Hundreds of thousands of workers worldwide, they are at risk of developing silicosis. The global prevalence of silicosis and other pneumoconiosis warrants further investigation into the methods of detection in its early stage. See, in occupational health, occupational diseases, most of the diseases are incurable, but they are preventable, provided it is detected at an early stage. Similarly, silicosis is not curable, but as you know, it is preventable if it is detected at an early stage. While spirometry, X-ray, HRCT can play important roles in respiratory surveillance, but there is opportunity for new methods such as biomarkers to become routine methods for surveillance and early detection. Coming to a little bit epidemiology of India, Indian situation, India has a huge burden of silicosis and mostly in the informal economy sector workers. It was estimated that about 11.5 million workers, they are at risk of silicosis because of their day-to-day exposure. Silicosis is often associated with silico-tuberculosis, as you all know, an important comorbidity apart from nephrotoxicity, increased chances of stroke, autoimmune disease, and to some extent lung cancer. There is a lifetime risk of developing pulmonary tuberculosis in silicotic subjects, even after stoppage of silica dust exposure. Also, there is uncertainty of detection of infection, TB infection particularly, and treatment outcome when there is associated silicosis. Based on our working experience, we have found that, and another point I must highlight, that India is committed to eliminate tuberculosis by 2025. But the elimination activities are not progressed to that extent which we thought. So now, because of our working experience, it was found that as we have a huge burden of silicosis, it appears that unless silicosis is controlled, TB will not be controlled and eliminated in India, as burden of silicosis is very high and grossly underestimated. Silicosis is usually diagnosed at an advanced stage. Nothing much can be done to prolong the victim's life or preventing premature deaths if detected at a late stage. Now, the best possible option is secondary prevention by early detection of silicosis, provided there is a suitable predictor or marker available and there is a requisite policy decision based on felt needs. Then only the secondary prevention is also possible. Now, our institute, that National Institute of Occupational Health, they conducted initially a study which conclusively evidenced that serum CC16 is a lung protein which is secreted by the club cell 16, and these club cells are situated in the distal bronchioles, and at least 25%, at least 22% or more than 22% of the cells, epithelial cells, are these club cells which are mostly situated in the distal tubules. So, and when this lung is damaged by inhalation of respirable silica dust, usually the peripheral part gets damaged fast and gradually progresses towards the central part. Our study showed that there is inverse relationship between increasing duration of silica dust exposure among the workers and corresponding decline of serum CC16 value. Now, another advantage of serum CC16 is it is a protein. This protein is diffusible to the peripheral from the bronchovascular secretion. It comes to the peripheral circulation, and from where just taking one finger, one drop of blood from finger pricking, just like taking diabetes estimation collection of one drop of blood. It's a similar kind of method. That one drop of blood, if we collect from the finger and test with that our kit, which I am going to describe after that, it will tell you immediately how is the lung condition, whether it is a early damage, moderately damaged. Now, many of the people, they argue that this is not a very specific marker. We understand that it is not a specific marker, but as there is no other alternative, but we understand that when it is applied to a selective group of population, those who are in the dust exposed population, it becomes reasonably specific or reasonably sensitive. That I am coming after some time. I am coming. So this slide shows in our initial study, the healthy subjects has average 16 nanogram per milliliter of blood, per milliliter of serum, and those who are having some exposure of less than 10 years, the X-ray shows X-ray was negative. Their silica dust exposure, but X-ray shows all negative X-ray, negative for silicosis. Their mean value was 10 nanogram per milliliter, and those who are X-ray confirmed silicosis, it had 4.7 nanogram. And this side, on the left side, it is for the healthy people. And when there is a smoker, there is some 2 to 3 milliliter, 2 to 3 nanogram shorter than the compared to the non-smoking population. Now, following the initial study, we understood that that study was basically corroborated, the value of serum CC16 corroborated with the duration of exposure. Now, somebody suggested us, if you estimated the duration of exposure, but there is no correlation with the lung damage. So, as per suggestion and as per based on our understanding, we tried to estimate the lung damage and corroborating its CC16 value. The following initial study, another study was carried out to observe the relationship between serum CC16 and the extent of silicotic lung damage due to occupational silica dust exposure. This slide shows actually we followed the ILO guideline, ILO radiographic guideline for assessing silicosis, and for estimating the amount of lung damage. We considered 4 points, basically 4 criteria. One is the size of small opacity, second one is the size of large opacity, third one is the profusion of opacity, fourth one is the zones of lungs involved. In the size of small opacity, as per ILO radiography, P is equal to less than 1.5 milliliter, we given a score value of 1, Q is equal to 1.5 to 3, we gave the score of 2, etc. When there is a size of large opacity, there is a B and C. A is more than 10 millimeter to 50 millimeter. We gave the scoring value 1. B more than 50 to upper zone of the lung. We gave the score value of 2. C more than upper zone. We gave the scoring of 3. Similarly, profusion also, the slight reduced transparency, we gave the scoring of 1. Then the moderately reduced transparency 1.5 and the severely reduced transparency 2. And zones of lung involved weightage is given according to the number of zones involved. If 1 zone is involved, the score was given 1, and if all the 6 zones are involved, score was given 6. Now, the total score was obtained by multiplying the values of small opacities with profusion of opacities and the number of affected lung zones, that means X, Y, and Z. And to these, the large opacity scoring value was added. So lung damage scoring was calculated using this formula X multiplied by Y multiplied by Z and adding the large opacity scoring value. And mild lung damage, we estimated the lung damage is equal to when the scoring value is between 1 and 6, moderate with the scoring value between 7 to 15, and the severe or high lung damage when it is more than 15. This slide shows some of the basic features. Age was mean healthy, we took the control, healthy controls. The age 37.5 mean age. For the mild lung damage, the mean age was 50, moderate lung damage 40.2, and the high lung damage it was 47.5. Duration of exposure shows for mild lung damage it was 28, moderate lung damage it was 21, and the high lung damage it was 19. And lung damage scoring for the mild lung damage it was 3.3, moderate lung damage it was scoring value was 9.9, and the high lung damage the mean value was 19.9. Serum CC16 it was for healthy it was 16.3, for mild lung damage it was 8.4, moderate lung damage it was 4, and the high lung damage it was 0.7. Now this slide shows the visually the bar diagram, the same thing with the diagrammatic view. Bar diagram, the red portion represents the lung damage and the green portion represents the amount of CC16. When there is no lung damage, that means healthy population, the CC16 mean value was 16.3 nanogram per milliliter. When there is mild lung damage, the CC16 value was 8.4. When there is moderate lung damage, CC16 was 4 nanogram. When there is severe lung damage, 0.7 nanogram per milliliter. This slide shows the same thing, but the linear trend, and there is an inverse relationship, and there is a declining trend of CC16 value as the lung damage progresses. There is a declining of CC16 values, progressive decline. So, based on CC16 value, we try to categorize the lung damage. The normal lung damage, normal lung when serum CC16 value between 12 and 20 nanogram, the mean value is 16 nanogram. In other studies also, they have mentioned this mean value is 16. Very early lung damage, which is usually not detectable by chest X-ray, or we can say subradiological silicosis, when the value remains between more than 9 but less than 12 nanogram, it is subradiological silicosis, but it is not detectable by chest X-ray. Mild lung damage, usually detectable by chest X-ray, when there is a CC16 value bit more than 6, but up to 9 nanogram per milliliter. Moderate lung damage when serum CC16 value more than 3 up to 6 nanogram. Severe lung damage 0 to 3 nanogram per milliliter. But the value will be 1 to 2 nanogram per milliliter, which becomes close to the non-smoking value on cessation of smoking. It was observed that when smokers they stop smoking for 1 to 2 months, at least 1 month, the value comes to the normal value, non-smoking value. Therefore, our understanding is CC16 may be used as a possible cost-effective and proxy biomarker. We are telling it's a proxy biomarker for screening and assessing progression of silica dust-induced lung damage in silica dust-exposed workers. If we follow up a group of silica dust exposed workers periodically, it will indicate early stage of silicosis reasonably well, which may be confirmed by radiography, either X-ray or high-resolution CT scan. The effect of smoking on CC16 value may be adjusted. This is our suggestion, but it is open. Anybody can suggest. So we can ask these workers whom we are going to screen, stop smoking for at least 1 month before the proposed date of smoke testing, or add 2 nanogram over the CC16 test result for heavy smoker, that means more than 10 cigarettes or bidi per day, or 1 nanogram for moderate smoker, more than 5 to 10 cigarettes per day. This work was first got recognized by the Indian Public Health Association, and they appreciated it, and they gave the first best occupational health work presentation. And recently, this Japan Society for Occupational Health conference, which was held in Japan, it was presented, and the presenter, she secured the best young researcher award based on this. The study, the title of the work was a study on assessment of lung damage among chronic silica dust exposed workers using ILO radiography and corroborating with serum CC16 level for early prediction of silicosis and experience from India. Now, following identification of this biomarker, our team developed a point of care, semi-quantitative and user-friendly CC16 detection kit using lateral flow immunochromatography assay technique. This is of ICMA National Institute of Virology, Mumbai unit. So there, the biotechnologies group, they made this kit in collaboration with us. Now I am trying to give you some idea about this. This is roughly the kit. Here the blood, 1 drop of blood should be put here, and gradually it will trickle down here. This, when there is this line, that means the test is valid. It is a CC16 related test, so it is a negative. If this line does not appear, then the test is not valid. So it is a negative control. Then next, when there is a one red line, that means the CC16 value is between 0 to 6. That means mild means CC16 value is 6.1 to 9 nanogram per milliliter. It is early silicosis, X-ray detectable. But when there is 9 nanogram and above, CC16 value 9 nanogram, there will be 3 red lines. That means it is CC16 9 nanogram and above. It is either very early stage of silicosis or it is normal. This is the image which will come in the market when it will be the image of the finished product. Now, our understanding is serum CC16 may be used as a proxy marker among workers with history of occupational silica dust exposure for early detection of silicosis as a screening test using CC16 detection kit. All primary health center workers around throughout the country needs to be trained towards this to support these activities. All vulnerable informal economy sector workers must undergo annual screening for this CC16 status to nearby primary health center or other related confirmed by chest X-ray or HRCT. This may be linked with some unique identifier because the CC16 value is related to the time. Since it is related with the time, so it should be linked with the time and unique IDs, because we have a good number of migrant workers. Today they are in one state, next year they may be in some other states. That's why it should be linked with some unique identifier. All vulnerable informal economy sector workers, including hired contractual workers, must undergo serum CC16 evaluation annually and to be linked with unique ID. A suitable legislation is required jointly by the relevant authorities, that is Ministry of Health, Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Mines, and Ministry of Industries. They all should sit together to coordinate this. A national silicosis control program is urgently needed for control of silicosis and silico-tuberculosis or tuberculosis. Now we published 2 papers, as Perry also mentioned, secondary prevention of silicosis and silico-tuberculosis by periodic screening of silica dust marker. This was published in Health Science Report. And another one is a Nature scientific publication, a rapid point of care CC16 kit for screening occupational silica dust exposure for early detection of silicosis and silico-tuberculosis. Now, our parent organization, that is Indian Council of Medical Research, which is an autonomous body under Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India, they approved this kit and they posted it through their Twitter. And this, at present, this kit is being commercialized and it is under manufacturing. Two companies, they are given license by Indian Council of Medical Research to produce this kit, and we are expecting in shortly it will be available in the market. Now, this is very interesting. This may sound a little bit odd also to some of you. Invisible silicosis or subradiological silicosis, which is often it is a lesser known, hardly recognized, often overlooked, the early stage of silicosis. Now, what happens? About 1 year back or more than 1 year back, I read one article written by Rodney, and they found which we never considered. But from public health experience, public health point of view, it should be considered, it should not be neglected, because the workers who get exposed to silica dust for less than 10 years, they usually suffer from subradiological silicosis, which cannot be detected by chest X-ray, but can be detected by lung biopsy. But what we do, we always wait for when he's having silicosis or when X-ray shows the silicosis or the CT scan shows silicosis. By this time, a long valuable period is missed. And this subradiological silicosis, ultimately, some of them or many of them, they will become the silicotic subjects. Some of them even will become the lung, will catch the lung cancer, will have lung cancer, some will have autoimmune disease, and many of them, they will have silico-tuberculosis. So if we want to stop silicosis and silico-tuberculosis, subradiological silicosis should not be neglected. That is my submission. So this is that I mentioned the subradiological silicosis. I will request everyone to read this one. This is a beautiful article. They have explained so nicely the importance of it. Now, the question is, following early detection of silicosis, what's next? Recently, there are a couple of studies. I just quoted 2 studies from China. The metformin attenuate silica-induced pulmonary fibrosis keyword signaling pathway, and second one is the metformin attenuate silica-induced pulmonary fibrosis via AMPK, adenosine monophosphate kinase signaling. Now, that means in the animal experiment, they have found the metformin, which is a very known drug, very cheap drug, relatively safe drug, used very commonly to treat diabetes, sometimes to treat obesity and some other diseases also. If we repurpose metformin after giving a clinical trial, randomized control trial to the silicosis, particularly in the early stage silicosis, probably it can delay at least the occurrence of silicosis, or it will prevent to a great extent. So this should not be missed, this should be done. So these findings support metformin in an inhaled formulation may be used as a potential therapy for silica-induced pulmonary fibrosis, which needs to be studied further in depth by a suitable randomized controlled clinical trial. Once silicosis cases are detected at an early stage, including subradiological silicosis, some of them need to be screened by CVNAT or TrueNAT diagnostic equipment for early detection of silicosis and for required intervention. This needs to be done in a well-coordinated programmatic way under national and regional disease surveillance program and the TB elimination program. Thank you for listening. This was my last slide. So once again, I thank the organizer for giving me this time and speaking. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sarkar. What I'd like to do now is then call on each of our discussants. I want to appreciate the questions that have been coming in and let you know that we're going to address all of the questions following the three discussants. Our first is Dr. Rees from South Africa, followed by Jagdish Patel from India, and Dr. Erlina Burhan from Indonesia. Dr. Rees is an emeritus professor at the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa. He was the former director of the South Africa's National Institute for Occupational Health, or NIO. Dr. Rees has had decades of clinical and research interests in silicosis and silico-tuberculosis, and has published extensively on this topic. I was happy to see that one of the references just shown was a paper that Dr. Rees was an author on. Currently, Dr. Rees is the chairperson of the Medical Reviewing Authority for Miners Workers' Compensation and a medical advisor to the Shiamiso Trust, a very large international compensation mechanism to provide benefits to former miners with silicosis or tuberculosis. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Rees.
Thank you. Are my slides visible?
Yes.
Yes. But,
Okay, well, first,
I'm not sure if you're showing slide mode yet, but your slides are visible.
well, I tried to make it slide mode. What's happening here?
Should be the bottom of your screen where that one.
Yeah, I've clicked on it. Has it worked? I've clicked on it. So I don't know is it showing in slide mode?
Sorry, we do see them.
Okay, great. All right. So first, thank you to Minosh and to you, Perry, for organizing this important webinar. I'm going to take a more broad and general look at biomarkers of silica exposure and screening tests for silicosis. I've purposefully taken a rather skeptical view, not to, I think mainly as a counterbalance. And of course, I'm also very aware that there are new developments, well, they're a constant in health. And of course, we have to welcome new developments as they come along. So my skeptical view is not that I'm not welcoming these new developments. I'm just want to present a slight counterbalance. So these are statements from two reviews of markers of pneumoconiosis and screening tests. The first is from Dr. Gulamian and others, which I think some of you will know this paper. It was published some time back, but it's still pretty relevant. And what she says, well, what they say is that markers of prediction and early detection of pneumoconiosis are imperative for timely intervention strategies. And the second is from a more recent review by Austin and others. And they conclude by saying that there's a critical need for an early detection method for silicosis. And my question really is, are these statements justified? And I want to consider this question under 4 headings. There are other headings, but I just feel to me these headings are important. It's biomonitoring of exposure, the diagnosis of silicosis, firstly as a screening tool, that is the presumptive diagnosis, which requires confirmatory tests, and detection of early disease, and then screening for TB, and last, assessing the likelihood of silicosis progression. So, measuring respirable crystalline silica is complex. It requires requires reliable measurement of respirable dust and then reliable measurement of crystalline silica. And this means that it's expensive. I said that it can be expensive, but it is expensive. It requires a lot of expertise and equipment, and it's unavailable in resource-limited settings. In fact, I could say not only in resource-limited settings, but it's actually surprisingly limited in even developed settings. So on the face of it, a cheap biomarker of exposure to respirable crystalline silica is attractive. But there's some things that need to be thought about in this supposition. And the first is that in principle, if it's dusty, you should do something about it. You don't have to measure. You don't have to measure the concentration of the dust, and you don't have to measure what's happening to people. If it's dusty, something needs to be done. And I wonder if positive levels of biomarkers will actually lead to action. If the first principle isn't being applied, what extra stimulus are you going to get from showing positive levels of biomarkers of exposure? Also, these biomarkers in general don't show the magnitude of exposure, so how intense is the exposure. Importantly, to my mind, it doesn't identify tasks in a job that require the most intervention. So it's important to identify the tasks that are producing the most respirable crystalline silica and focus on them. And of course, in many jurisdictions, this will not satisfy compliance requirements. Also, I wanted to just touch on the fact that there's quite a lot of work being done on direct measuring devices, which are cheaper and easier than the current gravimetric and laboratory-based measurement systems. And interestingly, here's a quote from NIOSH, well, from a document from NIOSH, which says that the power of real-time measurements has been demonstrated over the years, and OSHA supports their use. And quite an interesting statement to my mind. Employers can use direct reading instruments to measure real-time levels of respirable dust in air if the employer has information on the percentage of respirable crystalline silica in that dust. But also real-time devices are being developed for actually measuring respirable crystalline silica. So I think this is an important attention for focus. Sorry about that. So what about disease detection? Is it useful to have a test for silicosis screening? So screening tests, of course, it's a presumptive diagnosis which requires confirmation, and they could replace periodic chest X-rays, and they do have potential value, as Dr. Sakar has eloquently pointed out to us. And I guess some of the reasons they're attractive is that chest X-rays are insensitive, as Dr. Sakar pointed out. There's subradiological silicosis, invisible silicosis. So, well, chest X-rays are not always available in resource-constrained settings, and there aren't always people to read them. And then there's the radiation risk, which to my mind is not really such an important issue. But the point is there are problems with periodic chest X-rays, which does underpin the value of silicosis screening. But there are some provisos to my mind. I think the screening test should be sensitive. Now, you could make the argument that since chest X-rays aren't that sensitive, why should the screening tests be sensitive? But I guess my thinking about it is that if you're going to replace the standard of care, then you should replace it with something better. So I think being sensitive is important. Dr. Sakar mentioned in his presentation that they have found that CC16 reduced levels are sensitive in their particular populations, but I must say I haven't seen any data on it. I'd be interested to hear if Dr. Sakar could confirm that. But one of my big concerns is that I think there'll be a lot of false positives in the actual real world. Dr. Saka mentioned that these tests are non-specific, but they are non-specific in a lot of common diseases, which occur also in silica-exposed populations like COPD and also chronic asthma. Reduced levels of these biomarkers, or at least lead to positive tests. And yeah, so, and also, I mean, some factors are unknown. For example, it's not really clear what happens to CC16 in the presence of infections, acute and chronic. I don't know if Dr. Saka would like to comment on that later. And also important to my mind is that chest X-rays are really useful for TB screening. Just to quote one study, this is by Gavin Churchard and his co-authors, showed that you can reduce mortality from tuberculosis by more frequent chest X-rays. So, is it useful to diagnose silicosis early? In the main, early detection of disease is so that treatment initiation can begin early in the course of the disease. There isn't any established treatment for silicosis, though, so that's not going to be a factor. Dr. Saka did mention that there's a candidate treatment option, but there have been many candidates along the road. I think there have been, maybe I'm exaggerating, but there could be hundreds which have fallen by the wayside. So I'm not terribly optimistic about the treatment options. I guess one of the rationale for early detection is that you can then reduce further individual exposure, either through improving dust control. But I must say my experience is that this usually doesn't happen. I mean, even when you've got frank radiologic disease, I think improving dust control is the exception. And if you've got a biomarker only, I must say I'm not persuaded that factory management and workplace officials would actually reduce dust control based on early biomarker. You could relocate people, but often relocation options are scarce, and it could lead to job loss for people. So you've got early disease. So what does the employer do? They get rid of you. And in many settings, in South Africa, India, Brazil, China, many settings, job loss can lead to prolonged unemployment and poverty with all its attendant health consequences. And in any event, progression may be inevitable. I mean, there's actually very scant data that removal from further exposure halts progression of silicosis. So, biomarkers for active TB. I think it's a valid question to ask whether in the era of expert ultra, which is a highly sensitive test for active TB, do we need biomarkers? The answer is probably yes. There are many reasons, but one of them is paucibacillary disease. And it has been stated that silicosis does lead to paucibacillary disease. So there's lots of research on TB biomarkers, most of it unrelated to silicosis. But there hasn't, according anyway to most reviews, there hasn't been the identification of a really clearly validated good test for early detection. So I would focus on getting expert ultra as widely available as possible. The last point I want to make, and it's the second last slide, you could use biomarkers or screening tests to portend silicosis progression. Would this be useful? Well, it would be useful if you could initiate treatment to halt progression, but this is unavailable. And to be honest, I think there won't be a treatment option for some time, if ever. You could, of course, if you portend progression in an individual, you could then, of course, consider relocation, but the factors I've talked about before apply here as well. So in conclusion, I think that the case for biomarkers and screening tests has not been well made by the advocates. That doesn't mean there isn't a case. I think the limitations and the potential consequences need to be considered more carefully. And I think a prospective cohort study in the field of large populations is needed before one can clearly demonstrate the value. So my focus in summary would be on cheaper, easy alternatives for measuring respirable crystalline silica, developing strategies as Perry has done for just control in resource constrained settings, and how to implement them, and to roll out expert ultra. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rees. I think that was very useful and very good overview to the screening issue. Our next discussant is Jagdish Patel. Jagdish is an occupational health and safety rights activist and the founder of an NGO, People's Training and Research Center, or PTRC, based in India. He has been working for decades with workers in agate polishing in northern India, as well as with workers in ceramics and other industries to help identify victims of silicosis and other occupational diseases. And his organization helps them seek social justice and compensation. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Jagdish Patel. Jagdish, you're on mute. We see the slides, but you're on mute.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we do. Thank
Yeah,
you.
so thank you, Perry and Minosh, for giving me this opportunity. As Perry has already told, we worked for a long time with the agate polishers. Some pictures you can see here of beautiful artifacts they manufacture. We really welcome such research for early detection of silicosis, because day in and day out we see people dying before our rise of silicosis. So if we can prevent deaths and save lives, it's a good thing. Though we firmly believe that early detection only may not prevent workers getting silicosis, as this is more of a socio-economic problem than a medical problem. So Dr. Rees also said that is the early detection useful? Scientifically, technically, it may be, but sociologically, it may not be useful, because when workers don't have any other option for livelihood, they will continue working with the same thing and getting exposed. And when there is very poor governance, very poor laws, almost no laws, the dust separation would not be there, and technology would be the same, and people would continue getting exposed. So all concerned will have to work together to find sustainable solution to the problem.
Excuse me, Jagdish, your slides have disappeared. Maybe you could
Oh.
stop, restart the presentation. Or maybe it's your connection, I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry. Now do you see this?
No, they're not visible.
Okay. Now,
Yes, now we see slide 2. Thank you.
okay. So in 2018, National Institute of Occupational Health, where Dr. Sarkar was director, they approached us with a request to help them get volunteers who are confirmed cases of silicosis. It was an initial study for CC60, and we were able to convince about 16 volunteers to join the study and give their samples. Yes, we are concerned about workers dying of silicosis. So this study published in Health Science Report in September raised some questions. The study population was not representative of typical workers we have encountered, and that the study size, I think, is too small. So usually we see in our observation that longer the time, more is the damage, and shorter is the duration of exposure, less is the damage. While in this study, you see the different result. Well, I'm not a medical professional, but a social activist, so I do not go much into the scientific discussion. Now, as already said, this screening test is not diagnostic. It suggests high probability, and therefore X-ray is required. Now, if X-ray is required over and above blood test processes, it will add up to the cost of diagnosis. In countries like India, where there is no universal healthcare services provided by the state, and over 80% of the healthcare services are provided by the private healthcare providers, it will be an additional expenditure for the workers. Only 5% of the workforce is covered under our social security law called ESI, Employee State Insurance Act, to provide social security. So 95% workers don't even have this law to where ESI will be taking care of all the such tests. So we think that this proposal to develop this kit and use it at widespread and at primary healthcare centers, all the workers in unorganized sector to be screened is not very practical. In many of the primary healthcare centers, we don't have either we don't have at all X-ray machines, or we have very old machines, and there's a problem. Even medical doctors, many of the medical doctors employed in the PSCs are not MBBS. They are from the Ayurvedic or homeopathic faculties. So in absence of any nationally accepted and approved diagnostic standards for silicosis, we are afraid how it will be used by the insurance companies, including the ESI Corporation, which is responsible to pay compensation, and also the employers. Wherever there are big industry and it is organized sector, the employers may kick away the workers, saying that, oh, you are tested positive. So it may adversely affect workers' interest. We have seen that in extreme haste, this test is being propagated in India to commercialize the test. And we believe that there should be more discussion and further research before it is propagated. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Jagdish, for your perspective. And thank you for keeping it brief so we could keep on our timeline and open it up for questions shortly. Please continue to put any questions into the chat box, and please identify yourself so we could attribute your questions. Our next discussant is Dr. Erlina Burhan. She is a pulmonologist who currently serves as a lecturer and clinical supervisor in pulmonology in the Department Faculty of Medicine at the Universitas Indonesia and at Persahabatan Hospital. I'll turn it over now to Dr. Burhan.
Thank you, Dr. Gotosville. It is a great honor for me that I can join this session. Can you see my slide?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I'll start with okay, this one that I think to diagnose silicosis is really important, especially in the high burden countries for TB, such as India, China, Indonesia, South Africa, and also Philippines and Pakistan. So I think this is a general knowledge that silica interfere with the ability of macrophages to inhibit the growth of mycobacteria. So that means that if this silicosis is being not being detected, then we will have a increasing number of tuberculosis patient. And also with the fibrosis finding in chest X-ray, maybe in a high border country, people will think of that this is the post-TB cases, but to those who were never had the symptom, if there is a fibrosis, we should, and it just a minimal fibrosis, we should think of latent TB infection. But yet with this silicosis biomarker, I think we also can apply this CC16 serum biomarker to screen whether this fibrosis is silicosis or just the early TB. So in my institution, we do the bronchoscopy and doing bronchoalveolar lavage, even though it's not routinely done. If we are really thinking that this is a suspect of silicosis, with of course with a very comprehensive history taking, asking the patient whether there is a long exposure or any exposure of the silica. But yet there is in daily clinical work, sometimes we miss this kind of history taking. Yeah, this is the type of silicosis. So why I'm showing this, because I really want to know that in which type that CC16 serum is having benefit for the silicosis screening. Is it in acute silicosis or accelerated silicosis, or even in chronic silicosis? Even though with the chronic silicosis, we've seen the nodules more than 1 centimeter, and this is can be seen by chest X-ray. But perhaps in the future we can combine this chest X-ray with the CC16 biomarker. And but don't forget to exclude other infectious disease, carcinoma, or idiopathic interstitial pneumonia or interstitial lung disease, because the symptoms are just similar. So I like to show this chronic silicosis that can be seen by chest X-ray. If we can see this axial calcification. So if with this condition of our patient, and we think that this is a silicosis patient, I remember that you show that the result of the test is show the 1 band, 2 band, 3 band, and 4 band, the red band. So with this kind of condition, maybe the presenter can advise me that with this condition we will see the maybe a 3 band or 4 band. I don't know. Please advise. Yeah, okay, we skip this one. So this is my queries here. Indonesia has a lot of mining industry, including coal and cement mining, which contribute to silicosis. However, the disease is usually asymptomatic. So, can we use this rapid kit as a screening method for silicosis on workers? And if we do that as a baseline, so how often should the screening be done on workers? And should be it combined with chest X-ray, but or can is just done alone, just the CC16 serum test alone, or better perform also chest X-ray? And if we do this combination of chest X-ray and CC16 serum, do you have a data of the additional yield of the result of the screening for silicosis or even for tuberculosis? And these are another thought. Indonesia is known as a country with high burden of disease, and silicosis is associated with tuberculosis. Is the early detection of silicosis with rapid testing help to detect TB2? Will it have an impact to lower the country's TB disease burden? What I'm trying to say is that if we've done this CC16 and it's reveal positive, then we have the algorithm that it should be followed by, let's say, MTB ref expert, because in my country for the diagnosis of TB is doing the MTB ref expert testing. So what I'm trying to ask is, what is the cutoff point of the result of the CC16 serum before we proceed, or the parameter to proceed for TB diagnostic? And the last one, for the silicot, if we can detect both silicosis and tuberculosis, is anti-TB drug alone is enough, or we need also, as you mentioned, that maybe metformin or steroid or etc. I think that's all. Thank you very much. I offer to you, Perry.
Thank you, Dr. Burhan, and you've posed many questions, so we may come back to you when we get to the discussion. But first, I'd like to turn it back to Jinky Liu to make a few announcements before we proceed.
Thank you so much, Perry, for this wonderful webinar. Thank you, Dr. Kamalesh Sarkar, for that promising research and development project. And also our panelists, Dr. Rees, Dr. Patel, and Dr. Erlinda. We hope that a rapid, reliable, accessible, low-cost screening test for silicosis and silico-tuberculosis will come into fruition, but of course, within the rubric of the ethics of clinical trials, good epidemiologic data, and promises of universal health care. And that is why we are doing our webinar today. I would also like to take this opportunity to make some announcements about ICOH-MINOSH upcoming activities. Our current president of the International Commission on Occupational Health, Professor Xiong Kyu Kang, has requested the chairs of the various ICO scientific committees to disseminate our upcoming ICO Congress to be held in the beautiful Marrakesh, Morocco. This will be in 2024, April 28 to May 3, 2024, the 34th Triennial Congress of ICO. Please visit the ICO website at www.icoweb.org for further information. And I would also like to enjoin you to become members of our scientific organization, MINOSH. Please visit our website, ico-minosh.com, and click the membership form application. Okay. So now, the floor is open for question and answer to be moderated by Perry Gottesfeld.
Thank you, Jinky. I would ask that our speaker in the discussions turn off their mute, turn on their microphones. And I think most of these questions are pointed to our speaker, Dr. Sarkar. So I'll just go down in the order received. And if there's additional questions, please put those into the chat and we will come to them. First, Dr. Sarkar, are you off mute?
Am I audible now?
Yes, very good. So the first question we have is from Haiti Williams from South Africa. Can you please describe the secondary prevention that you're referring to? What would you refer to as secondary prevention in this case?
Yeah, secondary, actually, prevention, levels of prevention, there are 3 types of prevention, or you can say there is, basically there are 3 levels of prevention. One is the primary prevention, second one is the secondary prevention, third one is the tertiary level of prevention. Primary prevention means when we do something before occurrence of the disease, that is primary prevention. Here it is the scope is, the primary prevention of silicosis scope is very limited in most of the countries because we have the problem of huge unemployment problem, then poverty, unawareness, lack of awareness. These are the problems are there. Peer pressure is there. So primary prevention is extremely difficult. Then there is the industry pressure, owner pressure, etc. There. Now the problem is secondary prevention. Secondary prevention means early detection of the disease, and then you do prevent to stop further progression or slow down the further progression so that the longevity increases, longevity of the patient increases, and the lung health better restored or better retained. That is secondary prevention. Here, as these people are already exposed, when they get exposed for certain duration, maybe 6 months, maybe 1 year, maybe 2 years, that means already this process of silicosis has started, although it is not detected by chest X-ray. That means that's why it is secondary prevention. Now, silicosis, as I told, that chest X-ray, it is not detectable. It can be detected with confirmation by lung biopsy. Now, technically, there are problem of doing lung biopsy for so many people because lung biopsy technically is little bit difficult. Patient has to be admitted in the hospital. Then it has to be done either by doing bronchoscopy by pulmonologist. So it is extremely difficult for all patients routinely. The alternative is, I am not telling our kit is CC16 kit is not a diagnostic kit. Many people they are confused between diagnosis and screening. Screening means it is a suspicion, and diagnosis means when you are sure that the disease is there. So don't confuse between screening and diagnosis. CC16 kit is a proxy kit. CC16 kit is a screening kit. Please remember, CC16 is not a diagnostic kit. So we are not claiming that it will diagnose silicosis. It will just give some hints that this person is probably suffering from silicosis. Then it needs to be confirmed by chest X-ray. Why we are telling that? Because in an industry, there may be 100 workers, maybe 500, maybe few thousand workers who are getting exposed day to day. Now, doing chest X-ray at short interval or is a difficult, unnecessary. You are giving exposure to the person because unnecessary exposure it has certain hazards. On the other word, the CC16 test kit is a very simple test. Even the health workers at a rural health center or even the patient, if he is little bit intelligent enough, it can be done by self-testing also. It is just like blood sugar testing from a drop of finger prick, drop of blood taking by finger prick. So that's why we are telling it should be done in a programmatic mode. There should be a kind of national silicosis or sub-regional silicosis control program kind of thing, in which there will be legislation in the country in support of this. All the primary healthcare workers or relevant other workers, they should be trained first how to use this CC16 kit for testing. Once they are trained, then there should be one registry for all the workers with unique ID. Then every year, maybe in the date of birth or something, some important date, every year they should go and they should test. It will indicate their lung health periodically, longitudinally. So time should be mentioned. In this year, CC16 value is like this. Next year, after 1 year, CC16 value is like this. So you can track the lung health by this. The basic idea is doing this. If you can make it done, it will be a wonderful based on my public health experience I'm telling you. Another thing I like to mention, I was heavily engaged with HIV control program. Today there is no vaccine, but HIV is vanished or it is declined. Many of the people they are telling it is not specific to silicosis. I agree. We are taking CC16 out of frustration because there is no other alternative. There is no other better method for assessing or for suspecting silicosis in this selected group. In HIV, I'm giving one example in HIV. In HIV, the prevalence of HIV was assessed taking blood from the antenatal mothers. But practically speaking, scientifically speaking, antenatal mother's blood does not have any relation with general population's blood. But out of frustration, or there is a huge resource and other logistic issues, they used to collect antenatal mother's blood and they used to assess the local area general population prevalence. It is just like that. In public health, it occurs, it happens, it is valid. If you sit with other public health people, many of them, I am sure they will support it. So this is my submission. Please tell me. Next question.
Okay, Dr. Sarkar, thank you for that. I'd like to ask a new twist on this question that has come up about CC16 from Dr. Guadati. He said that CC16 depression is a non-specific marker for lung damage, has been shown in several studies of chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, COPD, as others have mentioned as well. However, it is also an intrinsic protective effect in vitro. Has there ever been an attempt to upregulate CC16 as a therapeutic or more likely prophylactic agent? Have you any information on that?
Yeah, CC16 is a non-specific, I agree. Because many people, they are trying to assess lung health using CC16 for chronic bronchitis, for emphysema, for other. But what I understand, or we understand, when there is a selective group who are continuously or intermittently exposed to respirable silica dust, if you use this group and do this test, it will be fairly specific or reasonably specific. It is not 100% specific, but maybe 80 to 90% it will give the specific result. That is our understanding based on our experience, working experience. So the group has to be the silica dust exposed group. What I mean to say, the group has to be silica dust exposed group without having other lung comorbidity in general. And those who are exposed to silica dust, they usually do not have other respiratory problems such as chronic bronchitis and others. Because once somebody has that kind of problem like bronchial asthma and chronic bronchitis, if he is exposed to dust, any kind of dust, he cannot sustain, he cannot continue working there because he will have severe cough and other problem and this thing. So he will leave that job and he will go for some other job. So that is our submission. It is a proxy marker. That's why I'm telling it is a proxy marker. It will give some proxy.
Okay. The next question is very simple. If there's an estimate of the cost of the test.
Yeah, I'm feeling the cost of the test. I am not very sure because there are certain issues that there. See, here we have to, it is in my mind, back of mind, that it has to be cheap. Otherwise, it will not be sustainable. We are trying to make it cheap, but while trying to make it cheap, we are facing one problem. It requires refinement of the serum. And that serum, refined serum is not available in India at present. We are importing it from some other country. Most likely it is getting imported by USA. So cost will be a little bit high. Otherwise, it is giving good result, but we are trying our level best to produce it indigenously. Once it is successful, the price will come very low. Maybe 200 rupees. 200 rupees means some less than $3 per test.
Okay, so approximately the goal is about $3 a test.
Yeah, that we are trying to do. Okay. But at present with imported kit, it is 1,000 rupees. 1,000 means some $12, $13. That is coming at present.
Thank you. The next comment is from Frank Michuri. He said this is a very insightful study. And the question he has is, are there plans to apply the study methodology to inform the workplace of exposure levels to crystalline silica dust? Is there a feedback mechanism for this kind of test in the workplace, in other words?
No, can you just repeat once again? I could not catch some of the issue. Can you repeat it once again?
Sure. He wants to know if there are any plans to apply the study methodology to better inform the workers in the workplace about exposure levels to
Yeah.
silicosis.
No, yeah. Exposure level, I am telling, it is little bit difficult, and that was not the focus of this study. We understand, and many of you also know that the progression of silicosis depends on 3-4 factors. One is the silica content of the dust, then the dust concentration in the workplace, then the duration of work in a day, and then the duration of work progressively from the test, from the exposure, and then the detection of this. So these so many factors, it is very difficult, and it was not our focus. We just wanted to say, suppose some person joined in an industry where he gets continuously exposed, after 6 months or after 1 year, then in the next year, then in the next year, how much is the lung health? So we are thinking in that way, and the study was designed in that way.
Thank you. We have another question from Dr. Guardati. The question he's posing is, given the great extent of the informal economy and the number of workers exposed to silica in the informal sector, how do we do this for workers in the informal economy, given the problems of reaching employers that don't exist and workers in this sector, especially in small workshops and artisanal mining?
Yeah,
Big question.
this I'm trying to explain it. And if government of India is convinced, I hope they will be convinced. If government of India wants, they can make a law in coordination with Ministry of Labor, Ministry of Mines, Ministry of Industries, and the other relevant industries. So all the workers working in any workshop, small joint, small factory, large industry, if they are exposed to silica dust, they should test at least once in a year and submit their result for registering as silicosis, because in our country, silicosis is a compensable disease. So to get certification as he is suffering from silicosis, he needs to go to the silicosis control board. So if the law is made, that's why I have told requisite legislation, a required legislation is needed for that. If government makes a law that everybody, those who are exposed to silica dust, they should go and they should check their CC16 value every month, every year, and it should be unique identity. It should be linked with unique ID, and once he crosses the threshold value, then he should be examined by chest X-ray for confirmation of the diagnosis. So this kind of system has to be developed under National Silicosis Control Program, under the guidance of Government of India. Then it is possible. See, I am telling, we have a ESI hospital, a large number of workers. They also get compensation once ESI identifies them as the silicosis patients. So once this kind of legislation government will make, all the ESI hospital for their workers, they will also start working, because I have already talked to the chief of ESI. They will also start working screening by CC16 for silica dust exposed workers. So it is possible. It is possible.
Thank you. There have been 2 questions on this next point from Dr. Ehrlich and Dr. Vargas. The question is, could CC16 assist in distinguishing silico-tuberculosis from TB alone, or silicosis from TB alone? And I noticed that your paper does mention tuberculosis in the title. So I think this is an appropriate question in terms of the testing that's been done so far.
I'm trying to answer this one. See, those who are having history of silica dust exposure, he should be tested with this one, CC16. Once CC16 shows that there is a damage of lung health, that means either he is subradiological silicosis or radiological silicosis, whatever may be, then the sputum of that patient should be tested with CBNAT or TrueNAT. This is the standard diagnostic procedure for tuberculosis. So it will help to diagnose them silico-tuberculosis at early stage. And as I have already mentioned, we are committed to eliminate TB by 2025. And the TB elimination activities are not progressed to the extent it is a non-progressed, at least you can say. Now the one of the reason is basically the silicosis. We are not exploring or we are not focusing the issues of silicosis, because as all of us we know that once somebody suffers from silicosis, he is very prone to develop tuberculosis. So unless we focus silicosis, TB elimination will never be possible. Also, Dr. Burhan also mentioned the same thing. They have a high number of tuberculosis patients. So silicosis and tuberculosis, they will go hand in hand. It has to be controlled, both silicosis and tuberculosis together. Yeah.
Thank you very, very much. I think you've addressed all of the main questions that have come in, and there's been some excellent comments that we haven't gotten to, but I refer everybody to the chat to review those. I'd like to thank you, Dr. Sarkar, for the presentation and for responding to these many questions that have come up. And thank all of the other discussants for their participation. And now I'd like to turn it back to Jinky Lu for closing comments.
Okay, thank you very much, Perry, for this very informative webinar. And it is a great opportunity for all of us, the stakeholders in occupational health and safety, to hear about recent developments in research and development, specifically inexpensive and rapid screening tests. And we hope that we can go a long way, and like the COVID-19 screening test. But of course, as I said earlier, these should be done within the rubric of the ethics of clinical trials, epidemiologic data, as well as the promise of universal health care. So many things have been discussed so far about the screening test, as well as the prevention of exposure to silica dust, which is the main cause of silicosis. So moving forward, I would like to say that the development of rapid screening tests that we have heard and discussed today is just a beginning. We will need a comprehensive occupational safety and health strategic program, from prevention, such as control of dust exposures in the workplace, all the way to treatment and control of the disease. Also, prevention of silicosis and probably the development of a low-cost rapid screening test will only become successful if it is sustainable. And this can be achieved by involving our government, the industries, the academe, and other stakeholders in formulating policies, laws, regulations, technical standards, and effective systems with multi-level and multilateral arrangements. I would like to emphasize that treatment and screening tests without corresponding programs and policies in place will simply be unsustainable. Okay, so now we proceed to our closing remarks. Professor Mukhtaruddin Mansoor is the Secretary of MINOSH. He is the Director of the Regional Center for Food and Nutrition of the Southeast Asian Ministry of Education. He is a professor at the Community Medicine Department of the Universitas Indonesia. He is a medical doctor, which he earned from the University Indonesia, Jakarta, and a PhD in Health and Community Care from Leeds, United Kingdom. Professor Mansoor.
Thank you for kind introduction, Jinky. Distinguished participants, moderator, presenter, and panelists. Let me, as a Secretary of MINOSH Scientific Committee, deliver these closing remarks. Exposure to crystalline silica dust causes multiple diseases, but silicosis, and silica dust-associated tuberculosis, in particular, are the two diseases that remain high on the list of occupational health priorities, especially in low-income countries, and that still occur in some high-income countries. We have got the valuable information from great presenter and panelists about the potential inexpensive and rapid screening test for silicosis as a possible secondary prevention level for the occupational, for this occupational disease, I mean. This actually, we know the webinar discuss about this potential. Sources of crystalline silica are mainly from mining, glass manufacturers, and agriculture. Although efforts have been made for many years in most countries to reduce silica dust level, silicosis continues to occur. The clinical and pathological features and diagnosis of silicosis usually use chest radiography and other radiographic imaging and tissue microscopic examination, and also some bronchoscopy, bronchial ultrasonic, as well as tissue microscopic imaging. The higher risk of mycobacterial infection in silica exposed individuals should have a particular attention, with emphasis the control. Treatment for latent TB is recommended. The management of silicosis and silica-associated TB, including monitoring for early detection of disease and surveillance to identify disease-causing workplaces, are discussed at this webinar with great presenter Kamalis Sakar and panelists David Rees, Jagdish Patel, and Erlino Burhan, and led by Perry Gottesfeld. Prevention of disease in the form of dust control remains the focus of WHO and International Labour Office Global Elimination of Silicosis campaign. However, clinicians must be aware that silica-associated diseases will be around for many years to come. Kamal Sakar offers serum club cell protein, or CC16 detection kit using lateral flow immunochromatographic assay technique. We really need a simpler and cheaper with a high sensitivity and high specificity method. This is our take-home task. We should do more effort to find one. I believe Mining Occupational Safety Health Scientific Committee with you all can make one. On behalf of MINOSH Scientific Committee, I'm Muhtar Mansur from Occupational Medicine Division, Faculty of Medicine, University of Indonesia. I would like to thank you all for your valuable contribution. Please join Mining Occupational Safety Health Scientific Committee by joining ICOH member and choose MINOSH as a scientific committee of choice. Apologize for anything made you inconvenience. Your constructive feedback are more than welcome. Have a good day and see you at the next meeting. Back to you, Jinky. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
so before we end, can we have a group photo, Liam? The panelists and the participants?
Yeah, sure. Should anyone turn on the camera? We have four pages here. Okay, I will count for you, everybody. All right. 1, 2, and 3. Okay, this is the first one. Wait a moment. Okay, we'll proceed to second one. 1, 2, and 3. All right, wait a moment. Okay, and the third one. 1, 2, and 3. And here the last one. 1, 2, and 3. All right, everything is done. Back to you, Jinky.
Okay, so we had a wonderful webinar indeed, and we hope our audience, our stakeholders, that you gained a lot of insight from our series of webinars, specifically the promises and potential consequences of rapid screening tests, which we believe would be important in resource-poor settings and low middle-income countries. This webinar has ended. Thank you again, and see you in our next webinar series.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jinky.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thanks. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Have a good day.
Thank you.